Last week, I talked about the book Quantum Healing by Deepak Chopra, a New Age author. I briefly summarized the book and talked about one of the 4 big steps in the journey that this book is trying to take us on. And specifically, Chopra argued that in quantum healing, that the fundamental reality of the universe is mind rather than matter. The other 3 parts are ahead, and they should be a little quicker, but there's still plenty to talk about. If you saw my last video, you would know that although I am not a materialist, I don't think that this abstract notion of mind or consciousness is the fundamental reality of our universe. But Chopra does, and so he applies this metaphysical worldview to the human body. This is a second of his 4 big teaching points. For instance, he said that it was discovered after hypnotizing patients after an operation that their unconscious minds heard what was being discussed in the operating room. I suppose this would make sense if the mind is not just an activity of the brain. He affirms the idea that our whole body thinks, not just the brain, because the same chemicals which correspond to thinking and or feeling in the brain are also located in other parts of the body, such as the intestines, kidneys, stomach, heart, skin, and most notably for our purposes, the immune system. So the whole body is thinking, not just the brain. Likewise, he says it was long known that insulin was made in the pancreas, but recently it was discovered that insulin is also made in the brain. And there are these brain chemicals that are also produced in the stomach. He concludes that this provides more and more evidence that the mind and body are amazingly alike. He observes that some people go insane after medications or therapy which target specific organs. So for instance, the heart is being worked on and the patient starts to go crazy. Chopra believes that perhaps the heart can go insane, which would imply that the heart is also conscious, in a way. He says that when one part of the body is sick, the whole body knows the sickness because the same blood in one part of the body is flowing to other parts of the body. He says on page 59, in fact, if being happy, sad, thoughtful, excited, and so on all require the production of neuropeptides and neurotransmitters in our brain cells, then the immune cells must also be happy, sad, thoughtful, excited. Indeed, they must be able to express the full range of words that neurons do. Many of us will notice right away that there is a lot of slippery language going on here. For example, he tells us that the mind and the body are amazingly alike because there are similar chemicals found between the brain and other organs of the body. But the mind is not the same thing as the brain, and even if it was, that's like saying Dr. Pepper and engine coolant are amazingly alike because they both contain water. He seems to operate in this kind of thinking a lot, even when defending his use of the term quantum. He observes various concepts of quantum physics and finds a correlation with concepts of the body healing itself and concludes that they go together. You just can't compare things that way. It's the fallacy of the undistributed middle term. And then he says that the whole body knows when one part of the body is sick because the same blood is touching all parts of the body. Why would we think that blood has the capacity to transfer knowledge? That actually seems to go against his own worldview. I thought the whole body is supposed to know that it's sick because the whole body is intelligence riding on chemicals. Take away the blood, and that should still have been the case. Later, he says that every cell in your body joins into whatever feeling you have. So I guess blood is not even necessary since not every cell touches blood. Likewise, he argues that different organs think because they have the same chemicals associated with thinking in the brain. My understanding is that it's not just the chemicals, it's the flow and arrangement of them in the brain, which is correlated with thinking. Regardless, I'm not sure how this helps Chopra's case because he claims that thinking is on a cellular level. So for this logic to work, wouldn't every cell need to have these chemicals? And when he says that immune cells have emotions because emotions require the production of neuropeptides and neurotransmitters in cells of the brain, if I wasn't a Christian, I would probably describe my reaction with a few unholy words right now, because this is just beyond sensible communication. People often critique Chopra of mumbo-jumbo technobabble. In defense, Chopra has said that once you understand it, it's no longer mumbo-jumbo. I'm telling you that this is an example, but there's nothing here to understand. What did pique my interest was these various studies, like hypnotizing patients to find out that they subconsciously heard the conversations happening around the operating room, or that the patients experienced mental breakdowns when something other than the brain was being worked on. That's interesting. It's not compelling enough for me to revolutionize how I view reality. It seems that other explanations are possible. I'd be curious to look up those studies and reports. But to tell the truth, of all the studies that are mentioned in this book, I couldn't find a single source referenced. No footnotes, no bibliography at the end, nothing. The only footnotes of the entire book were used to explain something more deeply. So I'm at a loss. I can't fact check this guy. You'd think that if he was trying to speak to an audience who cares about science, he would want an impressive bibliography with proper APA citation style, something. He never even quotes from any of the studies. You'd think that if science was on his side, he would do this once in a while, like a quote from a study that says, "Therefore, we have come to believe," or a quote that says, "The implications are," but no, as far as I can recall, Deepak is always the one who interprets these studies for us, which presumably exist. I suppose they do exist. Sometimes Chopra will mention the person behind the study, and so that helps some. I could try to look those ones up, but I tell you what, this makes me very nervous. In my own writing, I try to document everything I can, and it's not just for other people. It's for me. It keeps me in check. It keeps me accountable to what I say. I often rewrite stuff after I tediously double check my sources because the process helps me to identify those subtle slips of memory where I was wrong in the original draft. It happens to all of us. So I don't know. Maybe it was the publisher who removed all of his documentation because it would help sell the book. That would seem equally suspicious to me. Either way, I'm kind of at a loss here. Let's move on. The third of the 4 big teaching points that this book tried to do is give evidence and examples that we can truly heal ourselves in seemingly miraculous ways through attaining higher states of consciousness. If mind is fundamental, and if this mind is specifically fundamental to our bodies, then presumably the mind would be able to change the body, create the right consciousness, and you will be able to beat cancer, to reverse aging, etc. Probably the biggest signal that Chopra notices that he believes supports quantum healing is this curious phenomenon called spontaneous healing. This happens when someone with a disease, typically cancer, unexpectedly experiences improvement or a cure when they should have gotten worse or died, medically speaking. A materialist would say that there must be some physical phenomena that we don't understand yet, which must have cured the patient. Maybe the disease gave them a fever, and their immune system responded abnormally to the fever due to a rare genetic mutation which produced a special chemical which inadvertently destroyed the cancer. Okay, like a Christian or theist like me would say it could be that, or it could be God miraculously healed the person. Chopra says that this would be an example of quantum healing. He admits that it's a very rare thing, and I respect that. That's a plus for his character. But nonetheless, he sees spontaneous healing as a signal that something quantum must be taking place. On page 9, he says, research on spontaneous cures of cancer, conducted in both the United States and Japan, has shown that just before the cure appears, almost every patient experiences a dramatic shift in awareness. He knows that he will be healed, and he feels that the force responsible is inside himself, but not limited to him. It extends beyond his personal boundaries throughout all of nature. Suddenly he feels, I am not limited to my body. All that exists around me is part of myself. At that moment, such patients apparently jump to a new level of consciousness that prohibits the existence of cancer. That's a strikingly specific revelation these people get. But unfortunately, I cannot fact check that for you. But it makes sense to him. He says, look, if the body knows how to heal itself from a cut or a broken bone, then why not also cancer or other diseases? He likes to point out how there is so much science on his side now about how the way that the mind affects the body. For example, someone with excessive stress in their life is more likely to get sick. People with a strong will to live are more likely to beat cancer. An elderly widow who just lost her husband of 50 years suddenly fades really fast and dies a year later. He points out the effectiveness of the placebo effect. People take a pill that does nothing as part of a study, and yet they report feeling better. I would add the power of suggestion. Someone might come up to you and say in a worried tone, "Oh, you don't look too good." And if you take that to heart, you might feel a little under the weather for the rest of the day. You might even panic, which is going to raise your heart rate, which causes all these other real things to happen to your body. I would imagine that most of us take no issue with the examples of how our minds can alter our bodies in certain ways. According to Chopra, when he first published his book in 1989, this wasn't the case. People thought that our mindset had nothing to do with the physical nature of our bodies. So if he's right, I suppose that would be a nice victory for him. But the implication that Chopra is trying to draw out, which is still denied by almost all medical professionals, is that if only we could tap into our mind's potential at a deeper level, then the possibilities would be unlimited. What if instead we believed that there are some ways the mind can influence the body and other ways that it can't? It seems reasonable to me that the mind's influence on the body should be taken on a case-by-case basis, rather than a sweeping generalization under the faulty logic that some power implied unlimited power. Not that we shouldn't experiment to see if there's more to be discovered between the mind and body. I would admit that some of the studies he mentioned were a bit surprising. He pointed out that extreme stress levels in a child can stunt their growth. That's interesting. That could be explored further. But then you get these statements about anti-aging. Chopra tells us that there is no scientific proof that aging is normal. It is just something we all happen to do. What? The process of observing what all things happen to do is how we determine what's normal. I mean, the logic involved is called inductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning is paramount for the scientific method. Chopra should know this. He mentions inductive studies all the time. You can't dismiss inductive reasoning only when it's convenient for you. He mentions studies that talk about how healthy mindsets made people appear younger. That may sound like a miracle solution to reverse aging. What if instead, a healthy mindset simply helps the body to age naturally? Further, those who practice healthy mindsets also tend to be the same kind of people who eat well and exercise. Further still, there are other studies that provide mixed results or found no correlation at all between mental health and certain effects of age. So you're not getting a balanced picture by Chopra. This matters to me as a Christian because quantum healing promotes a worldview where we put our hope in ourselves rather than in Christ. I mean, this kind of thinking is not just false, but it's steeped in sin of the exaltation of self. It will corrode our faith and lead people away from the knowledge of the truth. Our hope is in God, who heals our diseases and gives us eternal life with Him for those who believe. If you're a skeptic or an atheist watching this, you're probably thinking right now that I just substituted one absurdity with another. Fair enough. I have other videos talking about why I believe in the Christian worldview, and I think the reasons I give are more compelling than the reasons Chopra gives in quantum healing. You can watch those videos to decide for yourself. But next week, I'm going to close up this discussion by talking about how Chopra believes we can train our minds to experience quantum healing. This is actually where I get most concerned as a Christian. I'm also going to share an alternative view that I believe is correct and even more hopeful. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.